made a roster move. What is that? I'm going to break that down for you guys in this video. If you are new to the channel, I talk everything Packers. So let's get into it. What's the latest news coming out of Green Bay? The Packers release kicker Jake Podlesny, former Georgia Bulldog, brought in to add some much needed competition into the kicking room, where Anders Carlson really had a disappointing season in a lot of people's eyes out there. And we'll look at his numbers a little bit closely here in a second. But Podlesny brought in to add some competition for Carlson, especially when he's taking a year in the playoffs versus the San Francisco 49ers. Man, it felt like there was a lot of Packer fans just sitting outside Green Bay with pitchforks, wanting Anders Carlson head on a platter, wanting him gone. And Brian Gutekunst hears that, and Gutekunst sees the need, so he brings in Podlesny to kind of push Carlson. Hey, this dude maybe needs some competition, so he brings in him. But then they move on and they go and get a veteran presence in Greg Joseph. Okay, so Greg Joseph coming out of Minnesota. We're going to take a look at his numbers a little bit closer here. So let's get down to it. Greg Joseph, throughout his career, he's around that 80. He's in around the 8. So he's 82.6% percentage accuracy, right? So around the 83%. His long in his career is 61 yards. Last season was 54 yards. He struggled a bit last season with the Vikings, hence why they move on from him. Packers bring in Joseph. So I think it's a brilliant move for Gutekunst, bringing in a veteran presence like Greg Joseph to either push Carlson into that extra confidence and keeping and retaining his starting role here in Green Bay, or Greg Joseph wins the battle between the two. Either way, it's going to be super exciting to watch come training camp. But ahead of training camp, you really don't see cuts being made. The Packers, Brian Gutekunst, didn't see the need to keep 3 kickers on this roster, so they move on from Podlesny and they keep Greg Joseph and Carlson. There is that 1-2 punch to see who wins that battle. Podlesny, as you saw in OTAs and minicamp, it was kind of like that third wheel, that awkward guy on that date, where it was clearly Anders Carlson and Greg Joseph that were going to be battling for that starting role. Podlesny, odd man out, he gets cut. So that leaves 2 vacancies on the 91-man offseason roster. So where does Brian Gutekunst go? He had his eyes on a couple of UFL players, one of them being a kicker, Jake Bates. He signs with the Lions. And then also Liam Fortnell, a offensive lineman that signs with the New England Patriots. So the Packers lose out, quote unquote, on 2 of those guys that they had their eyes set on. So the Pack going to be interesting to see where Brian Gutekunst goes from here. But obviously 2 vacancies there. They're going to fill those needs. So keep your eyes peeled. Stay tuned. There's going to be a couple of signings coming into Green Bay here in the near future. And as you know, those could be guys that are either pushing guys competition-wise, or, maybe winning those starting roles, or playing a large factor into the Packers' success this season, given injuries or whatnot. We'd be fools to think that injuries are not going to happen. They're going to happen. It's just a matter of when and where and to who, right? So Brian Gutekunst, I love the move. I think Podlesny needed to go. I think having 3 kickers on this roster, just too much, right? So let's take a look at Anders Carlson's numbers last season. So when we start talking about his overall percentage, it was that 81.82%, so slightly better than Greg Joseph season last year. Greg Joseph, again, slightly better that throughout his career, landing around that 83% in the long of 61 yards. Carlson's was 53 last year for the Packers. So when we start talking about extra point attempts, the dude missed 5 last season, and it ended up seeming to be like in crucial moments where the Packers really needed Carlson to step through. So that veteran presence, like a Greg Joseph, may come in super handy for the Packers. Leave your comments. Who do you think is going to win the starting role? Is it going to be Anders Carlson, or is it going to be Greg Joseph? I'm curious what you guys think out there. I happen to think it's going to be Greg Joseph. I think Greg Joseph is going to end up being the guy who kind of rises above the crop a bit, but it wouldn't surprise me to see Anders Carlson surface as the Packers starting kicker, because maybe all he needed was that extra competition, and Greg Joseph is certainly going to be that competition for the Packers coming into training camp and all that. A lot more to be seen. Stay tuned. And as always, go Pack Go.